The Forbidden Union Princess Valeth stood at the window of the medical chamber and stared at the stars beyond the glass, her silver hair falling like water down her back and her pale hands pressed against the cold surface as she waited for the results she already knew would come. The chief medical officer entered behind her and cleared his throat, his voice carrying the same tired disappointment she had heard 100 times before. "Your Highness, the tests confirm what we have always known," he said, and his words hung in the air like a death sentence. "Your genetic structure remains incompatible with all known species outside the Zerathi bloodline, and even among our own kind. Your particular markers make conception extremely unlikely." Valeth did not turn around because she did not want him to see the tears forming in her eyes. Tears that a princess of the greatest empire in the galaxy should never shed. "You may leave," she whispered, and the doctor bowed and retreated, leaving her alone with her grief and the endless stars that mocked her. With their cold indifference, she was 3,000 years old. Young by Zerathi standards, but old enough to understand that her mother, the queen, had already written her off as a failure. A princess who could not produce heirs, and therefore served no purpose except as a political tool to be traded away in some meaningless alliance. The Zerathi were perfect, or so they believed, their genetic code refined over 100,000 years of careful breeding until they stood as the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. Tall and beautiful, with skin like polished marble and eyes that glowed with inner light, and minds capable of reaching across space itself. But perfection came with a price, and that price was rigidity, an inability to change or adapt or grow beyond what they had already become. Valeth had always been different from her sisters and brothers, always asking questions that made her tutors uncomfortable, always wondering why things had to be the way they were simply because they had always been that way. And then she had met him. Commander Marcus Chun of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet had arrived on Zerath Prime as part of a diplomatic mission, a representative of humanity's fledgling interstellar presence. And Valeth had been assigned to show him around the palace as a gesture of courtesy to the lesser species, had expected to find him primitive and boring, a short-lived creature from a young world with nothing to offer someone who had seen millennia pass like seasons instead. She found herself captivated. Marcus was not tall or elegant or beautiful by Zerathi standards, but there was something in his eyes that she had never seen in any of her own kind. A fire that burned with curiosity and determination, and an absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible. He asked her questions that no one had ever asked her before, not about politics or power or her place in the succession, but about what she loved and what she dreamed and what she would do if she could do anything at all. "I would explore," she had told him one night as they walked through the crystal gardens, the flowers singing their soft melodies around them. "I would go to the edges of the known galaxy and see what lies beyond. I would find new worlds and new peoples and learn everything there is to learn." Marcus had smiled at her then, a warm and genuine smile that made something flutter in her chest, something she had never felt before. "Then why don't you?" he had asked. And the question was so simple and so impossible that she had laughed. "Because I am a princess of the Zerathi Empire, and my duty is to serve the throne and produce heirs and maintain the purity of the bloodline," she had answered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. "That sounds like a prison," Marcus had said, "not a life." And in that moment, Valeth had realized that she was already falling in love with this strange human who saw the universe so differently from everyone she had ever known. Their courtship was a scandal that rocked the imperial court. A princess of the blood choosing a human as her companion, a creature who would be dead of old age before she had even finished her morning routine. By Zerathi standards, Queen Sarathin had summoned her daughter to the throne room and demanded an explanation, her ancient eyes blazing with fury and disappointment. "You shame our house with this infatuation," the queen had declared, her voice echoing through the vast chamber. "These humans are children playing at civilization, useful perhaps as soldiers or workers, but certainly not worthy of a royal union." Valeth had stood before her mother and felt the weight of 10,000 years of tradition pressing down on her shoulders. But she had also felt Marcus's hand in hers, warm and steady and strong. "I love him, mother," she had said, and the words had fallen like stones into still water. "And I am going to marry him whether you approve or not." The queen's face had hardened into something terrible. But then her expression had shifted into something almost like pity. "Very well," she had said at last. "Marry your human pet if you must. It matters little in the end, because you cannot have children with him. Your genetics make it impossible. And so this foolishness will die when he does, and you will return to your duty." The wedding was a small affair held on a distant moon, attended only by a handful of humans from Marcus's crew and none of Valeth's family. But as they exchanged vows under the light of 3 suns, Valeth felt something she had never felt in 3,000 years of existence. She felt free. They made their home on that moon, a small paradise far from the politics and cruelty of the imperial court. And for 15 years, they lived in a happiness that Valeth had never known was possible. Marcus aged, of course, the gray appearing in his hair and the lines deepening around his eyes. But his spirit remained as bright as ever, still asking questions and dreaming dreams and refusing to accept limitations. And then, one morning, Valeth woke up feeling strange. A new sensation stirring deep within her body. Something that should not exist and could not be real. She ran the tests herself, because she did not trust anyone else with this secret. And when the results appeared on the screen, she fell to her knees and wept. Not tears of sorrow this time, tears of wonder. "Marcus," she called out, her voice shaking. "Marcus, come here, please." Her husband rushed in and found her kneeling on the floor with her hands pressed against her stomach, and her eyes shining with a light he had never seen before. "What is it?" he asked, fear and hope warring in his voice. "What is wrong?" Valeth looked up at him and smiled through her tears. "Nothing is wrong," she whispered. "Everything is right. Everything is finally right." She took his hand and placed it against her belly. "I am pregnant," she said. "The doctor said it was impossible. My mother said it was impossible. Everyone said it was impossible." She laughed then, a sound of pure joy that echoed through their small home. "But nobody told you that, did they?" she said. "Nobody told humans that impossible means anything at all." Marcus-chan, a simple soldier from a small blue planet, knelt beside his alien wife and held her as she cried. And together they marveled at the miracle growing inside her. The impossible had happened and nothing would ever be the same again. The impossible children, the pregnancy, was a nightmare, and a miracle wrapped together in 9 months of fear and wonder that tested everything Valeth and Marcus thought they knew. About the universe, Arathi physicians had never seen anything like it, because nothing like it ever existed before. A hybrid child growing inside a body that should have rejected it immediately. Cells combining in ways that defied every genetic law written over 100,000 years of Studi Valeth. Spent weeks at a time confined to bed. Her body fighting against itself as human and Zarathi DNA struggled to find common ground. And there were moments when Marcus sat beside her and held her hand and wondered if he was going to lose both his wife and the child she carried. "You should not worry so much," Valeth told him one night when the pain had faded enough for her to speak. "I am stronger than I look." "I know you are," Marcus replied, his voice rough with exhaustion and fear. "But that does not stop me from worrying." She smiled at him then, that gentle smile that had made him fall in love with her all those years ago. "If this child has even half of your stubbornness, nothing in the galaxy will be able to stop them," she said. The doctors they brought in secret to their moon home shook their heads and muttered about impossibilities, warning that even if the pregnancy continued, the birth would likely kill both mother and child. But week after week, Velith survived. And week after week, the life inside her grew stronger. And then one day, the scans revealed something that made even the most skeptical physician gasp in amazement. "There are two of them," the doctor announced, her voice trembling as she stared at the screen. "Twins, one male and one female. And they are both healthy." Marcus had to sit down because his legs would not hold him anymore. "Twins," he whispered. And Velith laughed through her tears. "Of course, there are twins," she said. "Human DNA never does anything by half measures, does it?" The birth came on a night when 3 moons hung in the sky, and the stars seemed to burn brighter than ever before, as if the universe itself was watching to see what would emerge from this impossible union. Velith screamed and fought and pushed for hours, while Marcus held her hand and whispered encouragements and prayed to gods he did not believe. And then, at last, a cry split the air, sharp and strong and wonderful. And the doctor held up a tiny figure covered in silver hair with eyes as dark as space itself. "A girl," the doctor announced. And then turned back because there was still work to be done. Minutes later, a second cry joined the first, louder and more demanding. And a boy appeared with his father's stubborn jaw and his mother's elegant features. Marcus looked at his children and felt something break open inside his chest. Something that had been waiting his whole life for this moment. "Kira," Velith whispered, reaching for her daughter with trembling hands. "Her name is Kira, and Theo," Marcus added, cradling his son against his chest. "Theo-chan." They were beautiful, these impossible children. Neither fully human nor fully Zarathi, but something entirely new. Something the galaxy had never seen before. The first years were difficult as Velith and Marcus learned how to raise children who did not fit neatly into any category. Children who grew faster than human babies, but slower than Zarathi infants. Who sometimes cried for no reason, and sometimes laughed at things no one else could. See, Kira showed signs of psionic ability before she could walk, moving objects with her mind and sending images directly into her parents' thoughts. But her powers were wild and unpredictable in ways that no pure Zarathi child would ever display. "She's not doing it wrong," Velith explained to Marcus one day after Kira had accidentally shattered every window in the house during a tantrum. "She is doing it differently, finding new paths that our minds cannot even conceive." Theo was quieter than his sister, more thoughtful. And though his psionic abilities were limited compared to hers, he showed an almost supernatural understanding of machines and technology. By the age of 5, he had taken apart and rebuilt every device in the house, improving each one in ways that made them work better than before. And when asked how he knew what to do, he would simply shrug and say that the machines told him. "They speak to him," Velith said with wonder in her voice. "Not in words, but in patterns and rhythms. And he understands them the way we understand language." Marcus watched his children grow and marveled at what they were becoming. These hybrid miracles, who carried the best of both their parents within them. Kira was fierce and brilliant, her silver hair flying behind her as she ran through the gardens, and her dark eyes sparkling with mischief and intelligence. Theo was calm and steady, always thinking and observing and figuring out how things worked. His hands constantly busy building something new. They fought like all siblings do. Arguments that sometimes ended with furniture floating in the air or machines suddenly refusing to work. But they also loved each other with a bond that went deeper than words. "They're going to change the galaxy," Marcus said one night as he and Velith watched their children sleeping. "I can feel it. That is what frightens me," Velith admitted. "My mother and the Imperial Court do not like change. And when they learn what we have created here, they will see it as a threat." Marcus put his arm around his wife and pulled her close. "Then we will protect them," he said. "For as long as we can, For 15 years, they managed to keep their secret, raising their children in isolation on their little moon, teaching them about both human and Zarathi culture, and preparing them for a universe that might not be ready to accept them. Kira grew into a young woman of startling beauty and terrifying power, her psionic abilities surpassing anything Valith had ever seen, but tempered by a human creativity that allowed her to use those abilities in ways no one had ever imagined. Theo became a young man of quiet strength and brilliant mind, his understanding of technology expanding to include systems and machines that he had never even touched. As if he could sense the flow of energy and information throughout the universe itself. They were ready, Valith thought, ready to face whatever the future might bring. And then the summons came, a formal message bearing the seal of the Queen herself, commanding all members of the royal bloodline to attend the celebration of her 10,000th year on the throne. There was no refusing such a command, no excuse that would be accepted, no way to hide anymore. Valith read the message and felt her blood run cold. "Marcus," she called, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. "Gather the children. We need to talk." That night they sat together as a family, and Valith explained what was coming, the court and the politics and the danger that awaited them. "Your grandmother does not know you exist," she told Kira and Theo. "And when she sees you, she will be shocked and afraid and angry, because you represent something that should not be possible, something that threatens everything she believes about our people." Kira straightened her spine and lifted her chin, so much like her mother in that moment that it made Marcus's heart ache. "Then we will show her that impossible things can be wonderful," she said. Theo nodded, his dark eyes calm and determined. "We are not afraid," he said. "We have each other and we have you, and that is enough." Marcus looked at his children and felt pride swelling in his chest. Pride and love and a fierce determination to protect them, no matter what. "Then let us go meet your grandmother," he said, "and show the galaxy what happens when humans refuse to accept impossible." The Queen's court, the imperial throne world of Zereth Prime, rose before them like a jewel floating in the darkness of space, its surface covered in crystal spires that caught the light of twin suns and scattered it into a million rainbow fragments. Kira pressed her face against the window of their ship and gasped at the beauty of it. This world she had only ever heard about in her mother's stories. And beside her, Theo watched with calculating eyes as he tried to understand the technology that kept such massive structures standing. "It is beautiful," Kira whispered. "It is dangerous," Valith replied, her voice tight with tension. "Never forget that. No matter how pretty it looks." Marcus stood behind his family and squeezed his wife's shoulder, offering what comfort he could, even though he knew it was not enough. He was not afraid for himself because he had faced death 100 times during his years as a soldier, but he was terrified for his children. These impossible miracles, who were about to walk into a world that might destroy them simply for existing. The ship descended through clouds that sparkled with psionic energy and landed on a platform of pure crystal. And as the doors opened, Valith took a deep breath and stepped forward into the world she had fled 30 years ago. Guards in shimmering armor stood at attention, their eyes widening slightly as they saw the human man and the two young people who followed the princess. "Her Highness Princess Valith," one of them announced into his communicator. With companions, the word companions was spoken with barely concealed disgust. But Valith ignored it and walked forward with her head held high. "Follow me and stay close," she murmured to her family. "Do not react to anything they say. Do not show weakness. And remember that you have every right to be here." The palace was even more magnificent than the city outside, its halls stretching for miles in every direction, filled with artwork and treasures collected over millennia of conquest. And Zarathi nobles stood in clusters and watched as the small group passed, their whispers rising like a wave as they noticed the twins. "What are those creatures?" someone hissed. They look almost Zarathy, but not quite. Is that a human with the princess? How disgusting. Kira felt her hands clench into fists and had to fight the urge to reach out with her mind and silence every sneering voice. But her mother's warning echoed in her head, and she kept walking. Theo moved closer to his sister and took her hand. A gesture of solidarity that said without words that they were in this together. Throne room was the largest space any of them had ever seen. A vast chamber with walls of living crystal that sang softly in harmonies too complex for human ears to fully appreciate. The far end sat the throne itself, a massive structure grown from a single piece of pure quartz. And upon it sat Queen Sarathine, was ancient beyond comprehension. 10,000 years old and still beautiful in the terrible way of storms and mountains, and other forces of nature that could destroy. Without even noticing, her hair was white as snow and her eyes glowed with a light that seemed to pierce through flesh and bone and see directly into the soul. 100 courtiers filled the chamber. Representatives from across the empire and ambassadors from a dozen allied species. And every single one of them fell silent as Valeth approached the throne. "Daughter," the queen spoke, her voice carrying effortlessly through the vast space, "you have returned at last. And I see you have brought your human pet. His name is Marcus." Valeth replied, her voice steady, "And he is my husband, not my pet." The queen's lips curled into something that might have been amusement or contempt. It was hard to tell. "Very well. Your husband, then," she conceded. "But who are these others?" These young ones who wear faces that should not exist. This was the moment they had prepared for. The moment of truth that would determine everything. Valeth stepped aside so that her children could be seen clearly. "These are Kira and Theo," she announced, her voice ringing through the chamber. "My daughter and my son. Your grandchildren." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the crystal walls stopped their singing as every being in the room processed what they had just heard. Then the queen rose from her throne. She moved down the steps slowly, her eyes never leaving the twins. And with each step, the tension in the room grew thicker until it was almost impossible to breathe. "Impossible," she whispered. And there was something in her voice that might have been fear. "You cannot have children. The genetics forbid it." Every test confirmed it. "The tests were wrong," Valeth said simply. The queen stopped directly in front of Kira and Theo, towering over them despite their Zarathy height, and reached out with her mind to probe their consciousness. Kira felt the touch like ice water, flooding her thoughts, and instinctively pushed back. Not with aggression, but with a defense so unique and unexpected that the queen actually stumbled. "What was that?" Sarathine demanded, her composure cracking for the first time in centuries. "I apologize." "Your Majesty," Kira said, her voice calm even though her heart was racing. "I did not mean to startle you, but I do not like others in my mind without permission." The queen stared at her granddaughter with an expression that shifted from shock to curiosity to something that might have been respect. "You pushed me out," she said slowly. "No one has done that in 5,000 years." She turned to Theo and examined him more carefully, taking in his human features mixed with Zarathy elegance. "And you, boy, what abilities do you possess?" Theo met her gaze without flinching, something that made several courtiers gasp at his audacity. "I understand machines, Your Majesty," he said. "All machines, even ones I have never seen before." "Show me," the queen commanded. Theo reached out with his mind toward the crystal walls, and suddenly the singing that had been silent resumed. But now it played a melody that no one had ever heard before. Something beautiful and strange that combined Zarathy harmonics with human musical patterns. The courtiers murmured in amazement, and even the queen looked impressed despite herself. "How did you do that?" she asked. "Those crystals have been singing the same songs for 10,000 years. They wanted to try something new," Theo replied with a slight smile. "They were just waiting for someone to ask them." Marcus stepped forward then, drawing the Queen's attention away from his children. "Your Majesty," he said. And he did not bow because he was not her subject. "I know this is a shock. And I know your people believe that what we have created should not exist. But here they are." He gestured to Kira and Theo with unmistakable pride. "They're not mistakes or aberrations or threats." He continued. "They are children. Remarkable children who carry the best of both our peoples within them." The Queen turned her ancient gaze upon him, and Marcus felt the weight of 10,000 years pressing down on his shoulders. "You are bold for a creature so short-lived," she said. "Do you not fear me?" "I fear for my children," Marcus replied honestly. "I fear for my wife. But I do not fear you because I have nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of." The Queen was silent for a long moment, and in that silence the fate of the entire family hung in the balance. Then she turned back to Velith. "You have defied every law of nature and every tradition of our people," she said, her voice cold. "You have created something that should not exist and hidden it from me for 15 years. "Yes," Velith admitted. "I have. And you feel no remorse." Velith looked at her children. These impossible miracles, who had brought more joy into her life than 3,000 years of existence had ever given her. "None," she said firmly. "I would do it all again without hesitation." The Queen raised her hand and the courtiers fell silent, waiting for judgment to be pronounced. "Then we shall see what these hybrid children are truly capable of," she declared. "They will be tested by our finest scientists and examined by our greatest minds. And if they prove to be worthy, they may yet have a place in this empire." She paused and looked directly at Kira and Theo. "But if they prove to be flawed or dangerous, they will be dealt with accordingly." It was not acceptance, but it was not death either. And for now that would have to be enough as they were led away to their quarters. Kira leaned close to her mother. "She is afraid of us," she whispered. "I could feel it," Velith nodded grimly. "Fear can make people do terrible things," she replied. "We must be very careful now." But Kira was not afraid. And neither was Theo. They had their parents and they had each other. And somewhere deep inside them both burned a fire that no ancient queen could ever extinguish. The impossible children had arrived at court, and nothing would ever be the same again. The proof of the testing began the very next morning in a facility deep beneath the palace, a place where the empire's greatest scientific minds gathered to study phenomena that defied explanation. Kira and Theo were separated and placed in chambers filled with machines that hummed and glowed with energies that no human technology could match. And for hours they were poked and prodded and examined in every way imaginable. The scientists were cold and clinical at first, treating the twins like specimens rather than people. But as the results began to appear, their attitudes changed from dismissive to confused to genuinely amazed. "This is not possible," Dr. Velrith muttered as he stared at the readings from Kira's psionic tests. "Her neural pathway shows Arathi structure, but they branch and reconnect in patterns we have never seen before." His colleague, Dr. Senna, nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. "It is as if her mind is constantly rebuilding itself," she said, "finding new routes and new connections, adapting in real time to whatever challenge we present." In the next chamber, Theo sat quietly while machines scanned his body and mind. And the scientists there were having similar reactions. "His immune system is remarkable," one of them announced. "It responds to threats in ways that neither human nor Zarathi biology should allow, identifying and neutralizing pathogens within hours that would take our bodies weeks to defeat. And his neural interface with technology," another added. "He is not just understanding machines. He is communicating with them on a level we cannot even measure." Word of the results spread quickly through the palace, and by evening the Queen herself came to observe the testing. She stood behind a wall of crystal glass and watched as Kira, faced a series of psionic challenges designed to test the limits of mental ability. The first challenge was simple: moving objects with the mind, and Kira completed it easily. The second was more difficult: creating and maintaining complex illusions. And again, she succeeded without apparent effort. The third was a test that had broken some of the finest Zarathi minds in history. A puzzle of pure mental energy that required absolute focus and perfect control. Kira looked at the swirling pattern of light before her and tilted her head. Thoughtfully, "You want me to solve this the traditional way," she said, "but there's a faster method." Before anyone could respond, she reached out with her mind and did something that made every scientist in the room gasp. Instead of working through the puzzle step by step, she simply restructured it, found the underlying pattern beneath the surface chaos, and pulled on it. Like a thread unraveling a knot, the puzzle collapsed into a single point of pure light and then expanded outward in a me burst of colors that painted the walls with impossible beauty. "How did you do that?" Dr. Velrith demanded, his voice shaking. "That technique does not exist." Kira shrugged, a very human gesture that looked strange on her Zarathi features. "I saw a different way," she explained. "A path that your minds cannot take because they are too structured, too rigid. But my mind is different. It bends where yours would break." The Queen said nothing, but her eyes narrowed with an emotion that might have been fear or might have been calculation. In his chamber, Theo was facing his own challenges. Surrounded by machines that the scientists had deliberately broken and told him to repair, he moved among them like a gardener, tending flowers, touching each one gently and listening to whatever silent language they spoke to him. One by one, the machines came back to life. But not just repaired, improved, working better than they had before. "How do you know what to do?" a scientist asked him. "These are Zarathi technologies that you have never seen before." Theo smiled, a quiet expression that reminded everyone of his human father. "All machines want to work," he said. "They want to fulfill their purpose. And when they are broken, they feel that wrongness like a pain. I just help them find their way back to what they are supposed to be." He paused and looked directly at the scientist. "Human machines are the same," he added. "Zarathi machines are the same. All technology shares this desire, and I can hear it when others cannot." The final test was conducted with both twins present, a challenge that required psionic ability and technological understanding working together in perfect harmony. They were placed in a room with a device that had been locked for 1,000 years. A puzzle box created by an ancient emperor that no one had ever been able to open. "This is your final test," the Queen announced through a speaker. "Work together and open the box, or fail and prove that you are merely curiosities rather than something truly remarkable." Kira and Theo looked at each other and smiled, a shared expression that spoke of years of cooperation and trust. They did not need to speak because they had learned long ago how to work together without words, their minds connecting in a way that was neither fully psionic nor fully technological, but something in between. Kira reached out with her mental abilities and probed the box's defenses while Theo listened to the machinery hidden within. "There are 17 separate locks," Kira reported, "each one keyed to a different psionic frequency, and 43 mechanical components," Theo added, "all designed to reset if triggered in the wrong sequence." They worked together for nearly an hour, Kira manipulating the psionic locks while Theo guided the mechanical elements, each of them covering for the other's weaknesses and amplifying the other's strengths. The scientists watched in silence, barely breathing, as the impossible children did impossible things, and then with a soft click that echoed through the chamber like a thunderclap, the box opened. Inside was a single crystal that glowed with soft golden light, and etched into its surface were words in an ancient dialect that even the Queen had to struggle to read. "To whoever opens this box, She translated slowly. Know that you have done what I believed could never be done. You have proven that the universe still holds wonders beyond our understanding. And that gives me hope for the future of our people. The queen fell silent, staring at the crystal with an expression that none of her courtiers had ever seen before. Then she turned to look at Kira and Theo, these hybrid children who had just accomplished what 10,000 years of pure Zarathi had failed to achieve. I was wrong about you, she said, and the admission seemed to cost her greatly. You are not aberrations or mistakes. You are something new, something that our people desperately need, but were too proud to seek. She looked at Valeth, who stood nearby with Marcus, both of them holding hands and barely daring to hope. You're human, the queen continued. His chaotic genetics did not corrupt our bloodline. They unlocked it, freed it from the prison of perfection that we had built around ourselves. Marcus stepped forward, still holding his wife's hand. Humans are good at that, Your Majesty, he said. Breaking rules that everyone else thinks are unbreakable. Finding ways forward when every path seems closed. So, I am beginning to understand, the queen replied. She turned to address the assembled scientists and courtiers who had gathered to watch the tests. Let it be known throughout the empire, she declared. These children are not to be harmed or threatened or treated as anything less than what they are. Members of the royal bloodline, and perhaps the most important beings our civilization has produced in millennia. It was not a full acceptance. Not yet, but it was a beginning as they left the testing facility. Kira took her mother's hand. She believes us now, she said. But she still fears us, Valeth nodded, knowing her daughter was right. Fear can become respect with time, she replied. And respect can become love. We must be patient and continue to prove ourselves. Theo walked beside his father, matching the older man's steady pace. Do you think they will ever fully accept us? He asked. Quietly, Marcus thought about the question for a long moment before answering. I think you will give them no choice, he said finally, because you and your sister are going to do things that this galaxy has never seen before. And when that happens, all their fears and prejudices will seem very small and very foolish. The impossible children had proven themselves once, but their greatest tests were still to come. The new dawn, the years that followed, were not easy because change never is. And there were many in the Empire who refused to accept that hybrid children could be anything but abominations. 3 assassination attempts came in the first year alone, each one more sophisticated than the last. And each one failed because Kira and Theo had something their enemies did not expect. They had each other. The first assassin was a master of psionic combat who tried to destroy Kira's mind while she slept. But Theo sensed the attack through the security systems and woke his sister in time for her to turn the assassin's own power back against him. The second was a poison designed specifically for human Zarathi hybrid biology, introduced into the air of their quarters. But Theo's impossible immune system detected it immediately, and his body adapted within seconds, allowing him to warn Kira before she breathed too much of it. The third was a coordinated attack by a dozen warriors who believed they were serving the purity of the Zarathi bloodline. And this one nearly succeeded because even Kira's powers had limits, but when the warriors breached the final door, they found the twins standing side by side, Kira's eyes blazing with psionic fire, and Theo surrounded by every security drone in the palace. All of them suddenly loyal to him alone. The battle lasted less than a minute. After that, the assassination attempts stopped. Not because the old guard had given up their hatred, but because they had finally understood that killing the impossible children was itself impossible. Kira and Theo used the years of relative peace to grow and learn, studying both Zarathi wisdom and human knowledge, combining traditions that had never been combined before. Kira developed new psionic techniques that she taught to any Zarathi willing to learn, methods that used human creativity to unlock abilities that pure Zerathi minds had never imagined. Theo worked with engineers and scientists to create technologies that merged human innovation with Zerathi elegance. Machines that were both efficient and beautiful, practical and inspiring. Slowly, grudgingly, the Empire began to change. Young Zerathi, who had grown up hearing about the hybrid twins, began to question the old assumptions about purity and perfection. Some even sought out human companions of their own, hoping to create the same miracle that Valith and Marcus had created. The Queen watched all of this with eyes that had seen 10,000 years of history, and she began to understand that her empire was evolving whether she wanted it to or not. And then the Vreth came. They emerged from the darkness between galaxies, a species so ancient that even the Zerathi had believed them to be extinct, returning now with a fleet that blotted out the stars and weapons that tore through the mightiest. Warships like paper. The first attack destroyed 3 border worlds before anyone even knew what was happening. Second attack pushed deep into Zerathi territory, overwhelming defenses that had stood for millennia. The third attack reached the outer systems of the throne world itself. And suddenly, the proud Zerathi Empire faced something it had not experienced in 10,000 years: the possibility of defeat. Emergency councils were held, and strategies were debated. And nothing worked because the Vreth were immune to psionic attacks, and their technology was unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. Zerathi ships fell by the hundreds and then by the thousands. And with each defeat, the enemy drew closer to the heart of the Empire. It was Kira who finally stood before the War Council and offered a solution. "Let us fight," she said, and her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. The admirals and generals looked at her with something between hope and desperation. "You are not trained for war," one of them objected. "You are scientists and scholars, not soldiers." "We are something new," Kira replied. "Something the Vreth have never faced before. And that means we might see solutions that you cannot." Theo stepped forward to stand beside his sister. "Give us a ship and a crew willing to follow us," he said. "One chance to prove that we can make a difference." The Queen rose from her seat at the head of the council. "You could die," she said, and there was something in her voice that sounded almost like concern. "We could," Kira agreed. "But if we do not try, then everyone dies, and that is not acceptable." The Queen was silent for a long moment, looking at these grandchildren she had once refused to acknowledge. These impossible children who had grown into remarkable adults. "Very well," she said at last. "You will have your ship and your chance." The battle that followed became legend throughout the galaxy. Kira led the strike force deep into enemy territory, using psionic techniques that combined Zerathi power with human unpredictability. Techniques that slipped past Vreth defenses because they did not follow any pattern the enemy could anticipate. Theo communicated with the enemy's own technology, listening to the alien machines and finding weaknesses that no one else could perceive, guiding their small fleet through gaps in the enemy formation that should not have existed. Together, they reached the Vreth command ship, a massive fortress that had never been breached in all the centuries of war this ancient species had waged. Kira tore through its psionic shields with attacks that no pure mind could have conceived. Theo turned its own weapons against it, speaking to machines that had never heard a friendly voice. The command ship fell, and with it fell the coordination that held the Vreth fleet together. The enemy scattered and fled back into the darkness between galaxies. And the Empire was saved. When Kira and Theo returned to Zereth Prime, they were greeted as heroes. And even the most prejudiced nobles had to admit that the hybrid children had done what no pure Zerathi could have accomplished. The Queen summoned them to the throne room one final time. But this time there were no accusations or suspicions, only gratitude. "You have saved us all," she said, and her ancient voice trembled with emotion. You have proven that the future does not belong to purity, but to possibility. Not to what we have always been, but to what we might become." She raised her hand, and the entire court fell silent. "I name Princess Kira and Prince Theo as heirs to the Zerathi throne," she declared. "And I invite humanity to take its rightful place not as a lesser species, but as partners in building a new empire, one that embraces change instead of fearing it." The courtiers knelt. All of them, even the ones who had once plotted against the twins. And the sound of their acknowledgement echoed through the crystal halls like a promise later. That night the family gathered in their private quarters, far from the ceremonies and the politics and the endless demands of Empire Valith, held her children close and wept with joy. And Marcus stood beside her with tears streaming down his own weathered face. "You did it," he said to Kira and Theo. "You changed everything." Kira smiled and took her father's hand. "We did not do it alone," she said. "We did it because you and Mother showed us that impossible things are only impossible until someone refuses to accept that." Theo nodded, his eyes bright with emotion. "Human stubbornness and Zerathi wisdom," he said. "Together they can accomplish anything." Marcus laughed, a sound full of love and pride and wonder at the miracle his life had become. "I was just a soldier from a small blue planet," he said. "I never expected any of this." Valith kissed his cheek, the way she had done every day for more than 30 years. "You were never just anything," she told him. "You were the one who refused to accept impossible. And that made all the difference." Outside the window, the stars burned on, bright and eternal and full of possibilities that no one had yet imagined. New age was dawning for the galaxy. An age when human chaos and Zerathi order would work together to create wonders beyond anything either species could achieve alone. And at the center of it all stood a family born from love and stubbornness, and the absolute refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The hybrid dynasty had begun, and the universe would never be the same in a quiet moment before sleep. Marcus looked at Valith and smiled. "Still think marrying an alien princess was worth the trouble?" she asked him. Echoing a joke they had shared for decades, he pulled her close and kissed her forehead the way he had done since the very beginning. "Best decision I ever made," he whispered. "Best decision anyone ever made." And somewhere in the stars, new hybrid children were being born. New possibilities were emerging. New miracles were taking their first breaths. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not by being perfect, but by being gloriously, wonderfully, impossibly human. And that was the greatest gift they could ever give to the galaxy.